Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Always exciting to be back.
There's been kind of a strange development with President Adama Barrow and The Voice, which is an independent news outlet there.
Right.
Barrow just dropped his lawsuit against the outlet.
Okay.
Now, on the surface, that sounds like a win for press freedom, right?
Sure.
But I think, you know how we do things here. We like to dig a little bit deeper.
Absolutely.
So I guess my first question for you is,
Sure.
What could we be missing here?
Well, the interesting thing is this might be a positive development,
Okay.
but it could actually highlight deeper issues.
Ooh, I like
In the Gambia.
deeper issues. Okay.
So let's just kind of back up a little bit.
Okay.
So Barrow, he initially sued the voiceover content that he deemed defamatory.
Right.
Now, whether or not you agree with that content, the very act of a president suing a media outlet sends a pretty chilling message.
Sure.
Right. It raises questions about, are there actually adequate safeguards in place for press freedom within the Gambian legal and political systems?
So instead of celebrating this, we should be thinking, why was this even allowed to happen in the first place?
Exactly.
Okay.
So this whole situation really shines a light on potential institutional failures that allowed this act of suppressing the press to even occur.
Interesting.
So you think about it, we've got the police force, the judiciary, and parliament, all of which should have mechanisms in place to protect that freedom of expression.
Right. So if those institutions are failing to do what they're supposed to do,
then it creates an environment where a lawsuit can be used to intimidate and silence critics.
Okay, so we have another kind of layer to this story as well.
Yeah.
We've got the Gambia Press Union.
Right.
They negotiated with the executive branch to actually get this lawsuit dropped. So that, again, on the surface sounds like a win.
Right.
But you're telling me there's more to it?
Well, there is a but.
Okay,
Some people argue that by choosing this path of negotiation, they kind of missed a golden opportunity.
What kind of opportunity are we talking about?
So what if they'd allowed this case to actually go to court?
Okay.
Now, sure, they might have lost, but it could have been a strategic loss.
Okay.
Think about all the attention it would have drawn.
Right.
The public scrutiny on Barrow's government for attempting to stifle the press.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like they would have been shamed on an international stage, and that could have forced some change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes the fight itself is more important than the outcome of a single battle.
So you're saying this case could have been a real turning point in the fight for a truly free press.
Oh, sure.
In the Gambia.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting then that the Gambia Press Union inadvertently played into the government's hands by negotiating?
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Okay.
But it does raise some interesting questions.
Yeah.
About what are the most effective strategies for advocating for press freedom?
Right.
In a context where institutions might be compromised.
So Barrow might be trying to look good.
It seems that way.
But the fact that this even happened and it was resolved behind closed doors does leave some uneasiness.
That's good.
Like, what's actually going on here?
Yeah, we can't just focus on these individual events. We have to think about the bigger picture.
That context.
Yeah.
All right, so what other angles should we be thinking about?
Well, let's look at some international comparisons.
Okay.
Believe it or not. There are some parallels between the Gambia and the rhetoric that we've seen from leaders in other countries.
Now you've got my attention.
Which ultimately backfired on them.
Let's hear it.
Remember how we were talking about that Gambia Press Union and how they may have missed an opportunity?
Yeah, the whole strategic loss thing.
Right.
Yeah.
To really expose the government's actions.
It's a very interesting idea.
Well, think about this. In Kenya, former President Daniel Arap Moi often dismissed opposition figures and the press.
Interesting.
It created this whole atmosphere where dissent was seen as being disloyal.
Oh, wow.
And ultimately, that eroded public trust in his government.
So silencing those critics actually made them stronger in the long run.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this is why the Gambia Press Union's decision to negotiate is so interesting.
Yeah.
What if, instead of working behind the scenes, they had used the lawsuit as a platform to publicly challenge Barrow's commitment to a free press?
I mean, that is a risky move.
It is.
But I can see the potential upside there. So you're saying it really could have been a turning point in the fight for a free and independent press in the Gambia?
Absolutely.
It seems like when you try and suppress free speech,
right,
it almost amplifies the message
for sure
that you're trying to silence. It's really interesting.
And it's something that the Gambian government should be paying attention to by trying to silence the voice. They might have given them an even bigger platform.
Wow.
And fuel even more public discontent.
It's a fascinating idea.
Right.
Yeah, it really is.
These long-term consequences.
So we're seeing this pattern
of
leaders who try to control the narrative through force or intimidation.
Yeah.
And they end up strengthening those very voices.
Exactly.
They're trying to silence. It's almost like they're shooting themselves in the foot by doing that.
And that brings us right back to the Gambia.
Okay.
Because if the government continues down this path, they risk creating a similar dynamic where these attempts to suppress dissent actually just fuel further opposition and undermine their own legitimacy.
So it's like they're playing a dangerous game.
Right.
And they don't even understand the rules.
It's not just about individual leaders or specific actions.
Okay.
We have to look at the institutional failures.
Right.
In the Gambia, we've got the police, the judiciary, parliament. They all have these really important roles when it comes to upholding the principles
of a free press.
Yes.
But if those institutions are compromised or weak,
it creates a breeding ground for this kind of behavior.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the negative consequences of suppressing a free press.
Yeah.
But why should the average person in the Gambia even care about this?
That's a great question.
What's at stake for them?
You know, a free press is so essential for holding those in power accountable.
Right.
It's a cornerstone of any functioning democracy.
I can see that.
When journalists can report freely,
Yeah.
without fear,
Uh-huh.
it allows citizens to make informed decisions about their lives and their country.
So it's not just about protecting the journalists themselves.
Right.
It's about protecting everyone's right
Exactly.
to have access to information and to be able to participate in the democratic process.
A free press acts as a watchdog.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. Exposing corruption, highlighting social injustices, giving a voice to those who might not have one.
Right.
When that voice is silenced, it impacts everyone.
This makes me think about the international community. Can outside pressure actually make a difference in a situation like this?
Well, that's a complex quotient.
Yeah.
It is.
Okay.
And one that we should probably delve into a little bit further. So international pressure can be a bit of a double-edged sword.
Oh, how so?
Well, on the one hand, it can shine a light on those human rights abuses.
Right.
And really put the pressure on the government to reform.
Yeah, because no country wants to look bad.
Exactly.
On the world stage.
Right. Nobody wants to be a pariah.
Yeah.
It impacts things like foreign aid and investment.
For sure.
So organizations like the UN, the African Union, they can issue condemnations, impose sanctions, send observers to monitor elections.
So they have some tools at their disposal then.
They do.
To try to put that pressure on.
And we've seen in some cases where that pressure has led to some positive changes.
Okay.
Release of political prisoners, adoption of democratic reforms.
So it can work.
It can.
But I'm guessing it's not always that easy.
You're right.
Yeah.
Governments can be really resistant to outside interference.
Especially when they see it as a threat to their sovereignty.
Exactly.
So how do you strike that balance of enough pressure to actually make a difference?
Yeah.
But not so much that it makes things worse.
You have to be careful, and that's why it's so important for these international actors to work with the local organizations, activists on the ground.
Yeah, makes sense.
So they really understand those nuances of what's going on and find the best way to support those folks who are fighting for that change within the Gambia.
So it's not just about sanctions or statements. It's really about empowering those local voices.
Exactly.
Giving them the resources and the platform they need to be heard.
Things like funding for independent media outlets, training for journalists, supporting those human rights defenders.
So back to the Gambia.
Yeah.
What does that smart approach look like?
Okay.
What can the international community actually do?
Well, they can start by making it clear to the Gambian government that freedom of expression, that's non-negotiable. It's a key condition for diplomatic engagement.
Interesting.
Economic engagement.
So no more turning a blind eye.
Exactly.
Just because the Gambia is small or strategically located.
We need to send a strong message that this is a fundamental human right
Okay.
And that there will be consequences for suppressing it.
This has been a really insightful look at this situation.
It has.
What are some key takeaways?
I think the biggest takeaway is that press freedom, it's not just an abstract concept.
Right.
It has real-world consequences for every Gambian.
Okay.
It's their right to information, to hold their leaders accountable, and to participate in the democratic process.
You need to be really vigilant in defending press freedom at home and abroad.
Great point.
It really is the cornerstone of a free society. You know how these seemingly isolated incidents are actually kind of coming together?
Right.
To maybe paint a much bigger and potentially concerning picture of, where Gambian democracy stands right now?
Yeah, there's certainly, a lot of interesting things happening, and it's worth looking at them in more detail.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we have to consider the historical context here,
Okay.
I mean, the suppression of the press that went on under Yahya Jammeh, the killing of the journalist Data Haidara.
Right.
The exile of, countless other journalists. This lawsuit, in a way, it never should have even, seen the light of day in the first place.
So are you saying the judiciary itself is kind of part of the problem here?
It raises serious concerns
about
their independence, In a functioning democracy, the courts should be, a barrier against attempts to stifle free speech, not enabling them.
Right.
If this lawsuit had gone forward, it could have had a really chilling effect on all independent media in the Gambia.
So dropping the lawsuit, while it seems like a positive thing, could actually be more like a distraction?
Yeah, I mean...
Kind of avoid international scrutiny.
A way to avoid having to address those, really underlying problems.
Well, not actually addressing the underlying problems.
Exactly. And that brings us to Rizki-Produkt OfficialTV.
Okay.
This is a platform that's been pushing for these really sweeping social democratic reforms in the Gambia.
Okay.
And they're raising a red flag about something that might not seem connected at first.
For those who maybe aren't familiar with Rizki-Produkt OfficialTV, can you give us a little background? Like, what kind of reforms are they actually advocating for?
Sure. So they're pushing for really comprehensive change. Strengthening social safety nets, promoting more equitable economic development, making sure that healthcare and education are accessible to everyone. Basically, they're fighting for a system that really prioritizes the well-being of all Gambians.
Okay, so back to the profanity issue.
Right.
How does that tie into these broader goals that they have?
Well, they're arguing that, this kind of language from people in power is actually a symptom of a deeper problem. A lack of respect for the Gambian people.
Got it.
And it really erodes public trust, creates this hostile political environment, which undermines the goals of social and economic justice that they're fighting for.
So it's like they're saying, if the government can't even, talk to its own citizens with respect, how can we trust them to implement policies that are actually going to benefit everybody?
Exactly.
So this is bigger than just bad manners.
It's bigger.
This is about a breakdown in the relationship between the government and the people.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental breakdown.
And this ties directly back to the lawsuit situation, right?
It does. Rizki-Produkt OfficialTV argues that the police, when they decided to press charges against The Voice, actively helped to silence dissent instead of protecting those democratic voices.
So they're saying the police are also complicit in this erosion of democratic norms.
That's exactly what they're saying.
Okay. Where does that leave the National Assembly in all of this? Are they doing anything to, protect press freedom, to promote that kind of respectful dialogue?
Well, Rizki-Produkt OfficialTV is very critical of the National Assembly, saying that they've completely failed to represent the views of the Gambian people.
Okay.
They're not holding the executive branch accountable.
So we've got, potentially, a compromised judiciary, a police force that's, maybe more interested in suppressing dissent than protecting it, and a National Assembly that's not really fulfilling its role in a democracy.
That's right.
This is not looking good.
No, it's starting to paint a pretty bleak picture.
Yeah.
And it all leads back to Rizki-Produkt OfficialTV's main point. The Gambia desperately needs real, comprehensive social democratic reform.
All right, so we've kind of laid out the players here and some of the potential problems. But what does this actually mean for the future of the Gambia?
Yeah.
Is there any hope for progress toward a truly democratic and just society?
It's a big question.
It is a big question.
And that's exactly what we're going to unpack next. So stay with us.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back. So before the break, we were really getting into, this kind of concerning situation in the Gambia.
Yeah.
Potentially compromised judiciary, a police force that, doesn't seem to be upholding democratic principles.
Right.
And a National Assembly that's not representing the people they're supposed to represent.
Right. A lot to think about.
It is a lot, but I think to understand, just how big of a problem this is, you really have to look at all these things together,
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dig into this idea of social democratic reform. Rizki-Produkt OfficialTV keeps bringing this up.
Yeah.
What kind of changes are they actually talking about, and how would those changes fix all the issues we've been discussing?
So, at the heart of it, they're talking about a system that puts the needs and rights of every Gambian first.
Okay.
We're talking about reforming education.
Right.
So everyone has a chance to get a good education no matter, who they are or where they come from.
Yeah.
Affordable health care.
Okay.
For everyone, not just, a select few.
Right.
And a real safety net.
Yeah.
For the most vulnerable people in society.
Okay. I see how those policies would definitely make life better for a lot of Gambians.
Right.
But I'm not sure I understand how they fix, the bigger problems.
Right.
Like the potential corruption of the judiciary, the police overreach, the National Assembly not really representing the people. Those seem like separate problems.
They do, but what Rizki-Produkt OfficialTV is saying is that all these things, they're connected. A society that's fairer, that focuses on social justice, it's going to naturally lead to a government that's more accountable, that listens to the people. When people feel empowered and they know they have a voice,
right,
they're going to demand more transparency. They're going to hold their leaders to a higher standard.
So it's kind of like a ripple effect.
Exactly.
If you can make the system itself fair, so everybody feels heard and valued, that fairness, that respect, it'll spread.
Right.
Up to the government.
To every level of society, yeah.
Yeah. And, think about it. If the judges know that people are watching, they're paying attention.
Right.
They're going to be less likely to give in to pressure from politicians or make decisions that benefit a small group at the expense of everybody else.
Exactly. And it's the same with the police.
Yeah.
If they understand that their job is to protect the rights of every citizen,
right,
they're not going to be so quick to, use force or shut down people who are speaking out.
Okay. And what about the National Assembly? How would these reforms change the way they do things?
Well, what they believe is that a more equitable society will lead to a National Assembly that actually looks like the people it represents.
Okay.
When everyone has the same opportunities in education, in the economy, in politics, you're going to get a legislature that reflects all the different viewpoints, all the different voices in that society.
Yeah, because if the system is rigged against certain groups,
right,
those groups are never going to be able to have their voices heard in government.
Exactly. And so it's not just about, putting some new laws in place or creating some new programs. It's about fundamentally changing the way the whole society works.
Okay.
It's about moving away from that top-down authoritarian, approach that has been holding the Gambia back for so long.
It sounds like they're calling for a revolution.
It's a big ask, yeah.
Not just reform, but, is that kind of change even possible?
It's a huge challenge.
Especially with all the deep-seated problems we've been talking about. How do you even begin to change an entire system?
Well, history shows us that societies can change dramatically, even when it seems impossible. But it takes a real effort from everyone. Activists, journalists, teachers, artists, ordinary people.
So it's bigger than just voting in a new government.
Much bigger, yeah.
Or passing a few new laws.
Yeah.
It's about changing the entire culture.
Right.
It's about empowering people to demand something better, to hold their leaders accountable,
right,
to create a future where everyone has a voice.
It's about recognizing that democracy, it's not the end goal, it's the journey.
Right.
And it's a journey that needs everyone to be paying attention, to be involved, and to be ready to challenge the way things are.
This has been really insightful.
Oh, good.
Thank you for helping to break down these really complex issues and making the connections between them.
My pleasure.
It's been really informative.
Yeah.
And it definitely makes you think.
Good.
But we're going to take a quick break.
Sure.
When we come back, we're going to look at what could happen if things don't change. The risks, the Gambia faces if it doesn't go through with some kind of real social democratic reform.
Right. There's a lot at stake.
There's a lot at stake. So stay with us. We've got more to explore. All right, so we're back and ready to wrap things up.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground here. This potentially compromised judiciary, police that seem to be working against democratic principles, National Assembly that's failing to represent the people.
Right.
And this, this urgent need for some kind of big social democratic reform.
Yeah.
It feels like the Gambia is at a real turning point here.
I think that's a good way to put it. The decisions that are made now, they're going to have huge consequences.
Yeah.
Not just for, the politics of the country right now, but for the future of democracy in the Gambia.
Right, right.
We've seen some signs of progress, like President Barrow dropping that lawsuit, but those actions, they have to be followed by real change, systemic change.
Okay, so let's talk about the other side of that then.
Yeah.
What happens if nothing changes?
Yeah.
What are the risks if the Gambia just keeps going down this road?
Well, the risks are pretty serious. If the government continues to, undermine press freedom, stifle dissent, ignore these calls for reform, people are going to lose faith.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to become cynical, apathetic, especially the younger generation.
Right.
They're the ones who are really looking for change,
And that kind of disillusionment, that can be really dangerous.
It just can.
It's like it creates this opening.
Yeah.
That people with, let's just say, less than democratic intentions can exploit.
Exactly. And we've seen this happen before in other countries,
Yep.
where people lose faith in their institutions.
Yeah.
And it opens the door for authoritarianism, corruption, all kinds of unrest.
The Gambia has had its share of political turmoil in the past, right?
It has.
So it seems particularly vulnerable to this kind of thing.
Absolutely. And it's not just about ideals or abstract concepts of justice. This is about real-world consequences that are going to affect every single Gambian.
So what would those consequences look like?
Well, imagine a situation where you can't criticize the government.
Yeah.
Where the media can't report freely, and the government can do whatever it wants without any accountability.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for human rights abuses.
Right.
Economic stagnation, more poverty, more inequality.
Okay, so that's the bleak picture.
Yeah.
But we've also talked about, the potential for change here.
Right.
The idea that social democratic reform could actually create a more just, a more equitable society.
Mm-hmm.
So what would a successful transition look like?
Yeah.
What would tell us that the Gambia is really on the right track?
Well, you'd have to see a real commitment to press freedom, not just empty promises,
Right.
An independent judiciary that protects free speech,
Mm-hmm.
a police force that respects everyone's rights, and a National Assembly that actually represents the will of the people.
And it's not just about institutions.
Right. It's about culture.
Yeah.
A culture where people can speak their minds without fear.
Right.
Where different viewpoints are welcomed and valued, and where people feel like they can actually hold their leaders accountable.
So there's a long road ahead.
There is.
But it's not impossible.
No, it's not. The Gambia has a chance to build a better future.
Yeah.
But it's going to take strong leadership,
Right.
active citizens who are willing to participate,
Yeah.
and a real commitment to justice and equality.
And it's important to remember, this isn't just the Gambia's problem.
Right.
The international community, people who believe in democracy, human rights, we all have a responsibility here.
Absolutely. We have to speak out against injustice, hold leaders accountable, and support the people who are working for change.
Well, this has been a really insightful conversation.
Oh, good.
The Gambia's future is uncertain, but the potential is definitely there.
It is.
It's really up to the Gambian people, with support from the international community, to build the just and democratic society that they deserve.
Couldn't agree more.
We encourage all of you listening to keep learning about these issues.
Yeah.
Have these conversations, to stay informed about what's happening in the Gambia. The fight for a better future continues, and we'll be here to help you make sense of it all.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.